The candidates for tonight's second segment, the candidates are running for Rochester City Mayor, and they are Cindy Maves and Ardell Brede. They have drawn numbers to determine in which order they will provide their opening and closing statements. And Mr. Brede will go first with his opening statement.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all of you, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters, the Post Bulletin, and the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum. But of equal importance, at least, thanks to all of you for being here. You're important to this whole process. Rochester continues to be listed by the national media and publications as one of the top 10 in livability, place to raise a family, grow old, and the list goes on and on. We're a well-managed city with outstanding administrative team and a city council that does their homework and is engaged in the entire city. It's a privilege to work with them. As mayor, besides attending multiple scheduled meetings such as City Council 52 or 24, Committee of the Whole 52 during the year, DMC, it's being an ambassador for the city of Rochester in over 1,300 events a year. These events range from attending a young man's Eagle Scout ceremony, a citizen celebrating a 100th birthday, reading books to elementary schools, and we've run out of time. We were told they were going to get 2 minutes, but anyway, I'm proud to represent this great city and think I do it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mavis.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Chamber and the Post Bulletin also for hosting the forum, and the library for letting us have it here. I'm Cindy Maves. I'm a lifelong resident of Rochester, Minnesota. I graduated from Lourdes High School and RCTC. I'm married to my husband Alan, who has an accounting firm here in town. I have 3 sons and 2 grandchildren, beautiful grandchildren, by the way. Not that you don't think yours are, but I've been active in the community, volunteering in my church, volunteering in the school system. I've been a scout leader, and all 3 of my boys are Eagle Scouts. I have to say that. Most recently, I've taken an interest in the local government. I've been attending city council meetings for about 5 years, along with an occasional county and school board and township meeting. My interests have grown with the city council. I have a passion for that. I've been an advocate for the taxpayers of the city. I know I can be more active and efficient with the government, and on occasion I feel that I've done more to hold the city accountable than perhaps our mayor has.
Thank you. Our first question comes from the League of Women Voters. What is it that has motivated you to run for office for the first time or continue to run? We'll begin with Ms. Mavis.
Like I said before, I've been following the city government for about 5 years, and I have felt like they're not responsive to the citizens in Rochester. 4 years ago, a friend of mine had a sample ballot, and she filled it out as far as she could get it, and she showed it to me and asked me to help her fill it out. When I got to the mayor's race, I didn't want to vote for either person, and so I wrote my name in. 2 years ago, I got breast cancer. And I knew when I survived breast cancer that God had a message that I needed to get even more involved than what I have been doing. And so I decided, okay, here it is. This is a sign. God wants me to go forward. He wants me to do more with my life. And so I decided that I would actually run for mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Brede.
Well, 12 years ago, I was asked by many people, and even before that, said, someday you've got to run for mayor of the city of Rochester. And at that time, I remember talking to the 2 Chucks, Chuck Hazama, Chuck Canfield. I always said we had the Chucks or Chuckles, and now we can have the laughs. But anyway, it's that request that came from the public and continues to come up all the time, that people say you're doing a great job, you represent the city very well. And I think I do that, and so that's the motivation I need. It's what the public feels is the mayor's job, and I think I fill that job quite well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. Brede. It comes from the Rochester Chamber of Commerce.
How could city policies encourage more business growth?
How can we encourage more did you say development or public?
Business growth?
Business growth.
Thank you.
Well, I think, a year ago we had a study done, and a group that was chaired very well by Jerry Williams to how do we make the processing go a lot more efficient and smooth. And I think we did come up with a number of ways to do that. I think we're a very welcoming city to that, and by witness of, just met with some folks today again that are going to be wanting to build a 220 unit apartment complex here in town. So it seems that people are coming here, and I don't see that we've got any real barriers to any of that.
Thank you, Ms. Maves.
The best thing that the city can do is get out of the way. Less regulations, less fees, get out of the way, let the businesses develop. But there's also a more proactive thing that the government can do to facilitate jobs. They can direct investment into schools and training and the colleges and make sure that we have an educated workforce here so that businesses want to come here and they want to grow in our community because they can get the workforce that they need.
Thank you. Our next question comes from the Post Bulletin. Yes, there, rebuttal. Yep.
The less regulation, there's a reason to have some of the regulations, and I often point out to students that come, if you want to build a deck on the back of your house, there are rules and regulations to follow. And we have heard too many cases where somebody has built a deck that's good for maybe their family, and then they host a party or something and it collapses and people get hurt. There are reasons to have regulations, and they're about public safety.
Thank you. Next question from the Post Bulletin.
What do you look for, or what would you look for when recommending appointments to the city's commissions?
We need to make sure that we are representing the entire community when we're appointing people to these committees. And I don't mean just where they work, but we need to be representing not just the downtown. We have plenty of people representing downtown. We need people who are going to represent the entire community of Rochester. We need to make sure that we're getting people involved. I was at a Kiwanis meeting again this afternoon, and I had somebody tell me that they applied to be on a committee and they never heard anything back. I've talked to at least 4 different people that have said their applications have gotten lost. Why are these people not being interviewed, and why are they not being looked at for these committees? I don't understand that. It seems like we have the same type of people on these committees time after time after time.
Thank you. Mr. Brede.
Well, I've always done the job, and I take that very serious, of recommending, and the city charter does say that the mayor appoints with the consent of the council, so they all have to go to the council for approvals. Diversity is in a single word, in its broadest sense. How do we get those kind of people to come forward? I look to all of you right now. It's, we run ads in the Post Bulletin, we've got it on our website whenever there are openings. I am not aware of people that have not been, or that they've gotten lost. When I've interviewed over 1,000 people in these 11 years plus, and appointed them or given those names, I think we've done a pretty good job, and obviously we're not putting people in that all work in one occupation or at one employer in the city of Rochester.
Thank you. We have, our next question is regarding financing and DMC. We'll begin with Mr. Brede. The Attorney General has ruled that Rochester come up with another $6 billion in private investment before additional state funding will be provided. How could this happen, and how can it be fixed?
Well, it's an issue that appears to be opinions of 2 different groups. The legislature was pretty clear in what they asked for. The Attorney General apparently has a different view of that. We will have to go back when the session is in session. And in talking to some of our legislators, this seems like it could be and should be a pretty minor fix. I don't think it's anything that we need to get too concerned about. Keeping in mind that this was a piece of legislation that did get through in 1 year, a huge piece of legislation, and so maybe there are a few tweaks that need to be done. I'm not concerned about it. I think we'll be in good shape.
Ms. Maves?
I cannot believe you are not concerned about a $6 billion problem. I'm very concerned about it. This piece of legislation was planned behind closed doors for several years. Our officials signed non-disclaimer forms, and they were talking about this. It was brought forward the night before it went to the legislators, to our city council. They did not see it until the night before it went up to the legislation. So who was in on planning this? Whose mistake is this? It's the people who were in those meetings, and our mayor was one of them. And now this has to go to the legislation, and now we have to, who knows who's going to be elected up there? Who knows who our representatives are going to be? We have an election. Who knows who our governor is going to be? This opens it up for anything that could happen. We could have all new people in there that don't want DMC at this point. We don't know. This is a big problem.
Thank you. Our next audience question will begin with Ms. Maves. If, as we predict, if DMC goes through, if 20,000 new residents arrive in the community in the next 10 years, what do we need to do to welcome them, to be prepared for them?
We need to make sure that we have all of the public things that we need, schools and roads and places for people, but most importantly, we are going to need housing for people. We do have an affordable housing crisis right now. We are predicted to have 22,000 shortages of homes. So it's important that we make it easy for developers to develop this affordable housing, and that we keep the affordable housing that we have in our core neighborhoods. I am for having building high density, but doing it around town so it's not all located in just one area. But I also feel we need to make regulations and stuff easier for these low houses. I talked to Jeannie DeWitts the other day, and she was telling me it's something like $15,000 to build a house before you do anything, before you buy one piece of lumber or one piece of property. We need to fix that.
Thank you, Mr. Brede.
There's no question that affordable housing is at the forefront of, and that is being addressed. Common Bond is an organization that has built some housing already, and they're on the docket to do some more. Weiss Builders have done a lot of it. As I said earlier, we've got someone I just met with today that are planning a pretty major addition to our city. So I think it's all being addressed, and certainly I think I would remember too that we cannot forget about our historic neighborhoods, that we do need to make sure those are kept intact as best we can. We may have to do a modification for some of those things, but I think we're going to be okay on that. It is being addressed. We have to do the diversity of jobs here in the city, transportation, and we'll be okay.
Thank you. Next question from the audience will begin with Mr. Brede. Are there any departments or functions not already in some fashion coordinated with Olmsted County that you think could be merged, and would you be willing to play a leading role in that merger initiative?
Yes, and we've done that. We've looked into that multiple times, and there are pretty good reasons why that hasn't happened. Different unions, different pay structures, all of that. But it's always worth looking at, and it's been done multiple times. It seems to be one of those things that's probably every decade or so it gets looked at. But absolutely, we would look at it. I'm not real optimistic that anything will change at the moment, but one never knows.
Thank you, Ms. Maves.
I think we have a huge opportunity to do more coordination with the county. I think that's something that needs to be strongly looked at. I was really disappointed when the head of our park department retired, and that we took the opportunity and they looked at coordinating the two park departments, and then that didn't happen and they went ahead and hired somebody. I think there should have been a much harder push for that. I think just leaving that up to the staff to say, well, look into it and see what you think is not the right approach. I think that's what our leaders should be doing, and I think they should have worked a lot harder. That was a missed opportunity right there.
Thank you. Our next audience question will begin with Ms. Maves. With the growth of Rochester, will you encourage a bigger budget to increase our police force?
We will definitely have to grow our police department as our citizenship grows, but that should come from more income from more citizens in our city paying more taxes and stuff. So, but having a strong police department, having safe streets is very important, and I would definitely support that.
Thank you. Mr. Brede.
Thank you, and I think, of course, as we look at the growth of the city, that will have to be addressed. It is interesting, that is one of our most expensive departments in the city, and with medical expenses and the insurance and the contracts that they have, that the costs keep going up. Besides just growth, we need to keep looking at the police department and other departments to more closely represent the city that they do represent, the diversity of the force itself. And we're doing, I think, a much better job on that now than we've done in the past. And so, but growth alone will not be the main thing that pushes this forward.
Thank you. Our next audience question will begin with Mr. Brede. The mayor has a seat on the DMC board. Who connects the development between city interests, such as city water streets, sewer, water streets and things, and so many other interests like the library and the railroad?
Well, besides the mayor, we also have one of our council members that's on there, and also a county commissioner. I feel at times my role, part of it is going to be the conscience on that, keeping in mind that anything that comes forward, whether it's through the EDA and then to the Destination Medical Center Corporate Board, all ultimately has to come to the City Council, and it has to meet all our various ordinances and codes and all of that. So I think that is pretty well defined and should not, there may be disagreements as we come forward with that, but it will be, I think, pretty well covered as far as being sure that it's being addressed appropriately.
Thank you. Ms. Maves?
Clearly that comes from the mayor and the city council president, because just this week they sent out an email representing the entire city council on what the priorities for the city were. But interestingly enough, not all the city council people had even seen that list. Was there a vote? No. But the email said from the city council and the mayor to the DMC board, this is what we see as the priorities for our city. So if all of the city council members didn't vote on that and they didn't have a say in that, then clearly that had to come from the mayor and the city council president. So are the rest of us going to have a say in this? I think we should. I don't think that's the way things should be done. That's why our city council votes, so that we can have input in it.
Yes.
Well, obviously, a lot of these things have to start somewhere, and that was one of those that starts, and there will be discussion amongst the council, but also to give direction to the DMC board. So it's not something that's being hidden in a closet someplace. These things do get discussed, and this was just one of those steps to start that process of discussion.
Thank you.
Sure, they should be discussed, but shouldn't, if the city council's name is going to be on the email, shouldn't the city council have a say in that? Shouldn't they know what's coming out instead of they getting the email the same time that the DMC gets the email? That's why we have city government as our representatives, because we vote them in and they represent us, and they should have a say in it, and there shouldn't just be a couple of people deciding things. There shouldn't have been a few people deciding the whole DMC thing from the beginning, and there shouldn't be just a few people deciding what the city's priorities are now.
Thank you. Our next audience question will begin with Ms. Maves. What is your vision for our city, and what is your role What would your role be as mayor in determining this?
My biggest vision for the city of Rochester is that you have a say, and that we all have a say. That the people that live in this community are deciding what happens in this community. As a mayor, I'd like to have a roundtable with the neighborhood groups once a month, and I'd like to be meeting with them and hearing what's going on in their neighborhood, how we can make things better. Can we make the streets safer? Do they need improvements in their area? Are the people keeping up their properties? What do they need? That is the vision for Rochester. It's about the people. It's not about the pavement. It's not about prestige and power. It's about the people. And it's about the patients who come here. And it's about being good, caring citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Brede.
The vision is that we would continue to be a welcoming and inclusive community, and that means to all people that want to come here. Obviously, part of the DMC mission is that we become a world-class, or continue to grow towards that world-class city, world-class medical center, which it already is. The City Council, as I mentioned earlier, I think are really in touch with the constituents in their area, and we do get that input from our citizens. It is about our own people, and to be able to represent them is our job to do, but it is then to meld that in with continuing to be that welcoming and inclusive community. There's too many other cities in the world that are not seeing the growth that we've been experiencing, and we are very fortunate to be able to have that kind of growth.
Thank you. Our next audience question will begin with Mr. Brede. Some letters to the Rochester Post-Bulletin during this campaign have included allegations of corruption and voter fraud during the current mayor's term in office. Can you comment on this?
I'll say no, because I don't know what those are. I've never heard of that.
Okay, Ms. Maves?
I don't know necessarily about corruption, but I do know that the vote for the city sales tax was not clearly represented to the citizens of this community. We were asked to vote in $20 million for a destination medical community. You remember that word, community? And that was in November. And by January 30th, we were going to the legislature and we were asking for this huge amount of money to make something called a destination medical center. Somehow that changed overnight. I don't know how that happened, but somebody knows how that happened. There was clearly some sort of a plan going on, and we were not told the truth from the beginning, and we were not told the truth when we voted on that city sales tax.
Thank you. Our next question from the audience, we will begin with Ms. Maves. Given what you know about each other, how do your views and political styles differ from your opponent?
I think that our views are different because I think that the mayor represents the downtown group of people. I think he tends to be focused on what's happening downtown, what's happening in the Peace Plaza, what's happening at Mayo, and I am a person who is focused on what's happening in my community. I think that I connect with the average person. I think that I understand the average person, and I've been a lifelong resident here, and I know what it is to be a resident of this town and to feel left out of the process.
Thank you. Mr. Brede?
I've said over and over again that I'm the mayor for all people, but here's a chance for me to share with you a comment that came from, he's really the godfather of all mayors, Mayor Joe Riley from Charleston, South Carolina, who I know through the U.S. Conference of Mayors. He wrote this to me: "The purity of your dedication to public service, the honest and intellectual, thorough manner in which you approach issues, your enormous goodwill and optimistic approach to city matters and life in general are all very beneficial topics to all mayors who have a chance to work with you." I think that summarizes, and I'm very proud of that comment by him.
Thank you. Next question will begin with Mr. Brede. Rochester has a weak mayor, strong council system. One of the few tools the mayor has is the veto. How do you use it?
The use of the mayor, I use it very discriminately. I don't think it's something that we just get rather flippant about it. And so it's the communication that goes on between the council and the mayor and the council, and with administrative staff. And so that should not be a surprise when it comes forward that at some point that I don't particularly agree. Fortunately, I think in my 11 years or so, I think we've only done it 5 times. I've been successful in a couple and not so successful in others, but the weak mayor system is by a word. I don't think we want to change that. We're served quite well, not just by me, but previous mayors as well.
Thank you, Ms. Mavis.
You know, I was having a conversation the other night with John Howe he used to be the mayor over in Red Wing, and he was asking about our system, and I told him that we had a weak system, and then he said, oh, so the mayor doesn't have a vote, and I said, no, he has veto power. And he said, well, that really isn't that weak of a system. He says, if you have the veto power. The veto power should be used very infrequently, but the important thing is that the mayor weighs in on what his opinion is long before the veto power ever happens. Now, we had this problem with the 5th on 5th place, where that thing went on for months and months and months, that discussion. It kept coming back to the board and coming back to the board, and the mayor never weighed in on it. And then, after it passed, he vetoed it. That's wrong. That discussion needs to happen long before that comes to the mayor's desk. He needs to be discussing that ahead of time with the citizens and with the council.
Thank you. We'll begin our next question with Ms. Mavis. Should the mayor's position remain nonpartisan?
Absolutely, the mayor's position should remain nonpartisan. That's important. We do not need to bring partisanship into the mayor's office, and I was really disappointed when the mayor brought it into the mayor's office 4 years ago, when as the mayor of Rochester, he decided to endorse all the Democrat candidates. And he went to a press conference at the Democrat headquarters and said, the only people to vote for this election is the Democrats. And I also was really upset when the mayor decided to use our city hall and his position as the mayor to say that we should not have voter ID. That was a constitutional amendment that was up to the voters to decide, and I did not feel that the mayor should be using city hall telling the rest of the citizens in our city how they should vote.
Thank you. Mr. Brede?
Well, I would say the first rule, should it be? Absolutely not. Partisan. As I've learned long ago, it's a pothole or a street light out is neither Republican or Democrat, it just needs to be fixed. The issue that came forward with 4 years ago was the various candidates that were running for governor at that time. Some were that they were going to drastically change our local government aid, and the person that did succeed, Governor Dayton, was one that was going to try and make that even better. That was the reason that I chose to go that route. It's the first and only time I've done that as mayor. So, I totally agree that it should never become a partisan position.
Thank you. The next question that the city council candidates also addressed, if the owner of the Chateau Theater wishes to demolish the building, is there a role that you have in that decision?
I'll either be standing in front with a big sign, or I'll lay down in front of the door that it won't happen. Just that is a treasure in Rochester. It's in a wonderful location. We have to find the right use for that, perhaps back to being a theater as it once was, but I would fight that as hard as I could, and like I said, I will stand in front of the door before the wrecking ball would ever hit that.
Thank you.
And we do have an ordinance that says that any demolition, people have to bring that forward to the council. So.
Thank you. Ms. Mavis?
That building is on the historic registration, And so it would be really difficult for them to just take that building down, but I definitely would stand up for that building. That has a lot of historical significance to our town. It's a beautiful building. I would love to see that building used maybe as an art center or as an entertainment center or something like that, but we have to make sure that we get some private investment to that, because we don't have the funds to just pay for that out of city funds. That's going to have to come from some private investment, and I would encourage, local businesses to get involved in that and try to support that.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Ms. Maves. Do you believe that there should be term limits in the mayoral role?
Of course, I believe there should be term limits. You know why? Because in 1994, 83% of the voters voted for term limits for the mayor position, 12 years. 83%, imagine that. How many things get 83% of the vote? Very few. I'll bet you couldn't get 83% of the people to say the sky is blue. It's hard to get 83%, but 83% of us said, we want term limits. The state came back and said that cities can't have term limits. And they actually haven't even said it to our city. They said it about another city. But it's still in the city charter. And if you read the first lines in the city charter, it says that the mayor's job is to enforce the city charter and make sure that the city's running by the city charter. Our city charter says 12-year term limits. If the mayor's not going to enforce that, what is he going to enforce in the city charter?
Mr. Brede?
Well, it was deemed unconstitutional by the state of Minnesota, so I guess, are you against the Constitution? Also, the Post Bulletin recently said, and I agree with that, that is counterintuitive to tell voters that they're not smart enough to vote an ineffective politician out of office. And I think it's up to the voters to do that. I do not believe in term limits.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Mr. Brede. What motivated you to run for mayor in the first place and rerun now?
I thought we had that question earlier.
Did we? Oh, I'm so sorry. Outside of being a mayor, can you give us a brief description of your community involvement?
And I suppose we only got a minute for that too. I've been on numerous boards over the years, president of our church, president of the civic music, many organizations. Currently I'm on the board of the Minnesota State Arts Board. I'm chairing now the Region Candidate Advisory Board of the state of Minnesota, where we are looking for candidates to be a regent for the University of Minnesota. There's multiple organizations. My card is outside there that lists many of them. And so it's something that I thoroughly enjoy. As was also reported in the paper, was that at one time I did want to become a Lutheran pastor, and I guess my ministry, as it said, has taken a different direction. But it is an opportunity to serve, and I think that's what it's all about.
Thank you. Ms. Mavis?
Well, my biggest community activism has been involved with my kids. I have been a volunteer in the Rochester public school systems. I've worked in the library. I've worked with different teachers. I was always wanted to be in the schools when my kids were in there. I've been a coach on different sports with my kids. I taught religious education in my church for 10 years. I was a scout leader, a Boy Scout leader. As I said, my kids were in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts all the way through and became Eagle Scouts. But mostly I've been really involved in some activities with supporting the people in Haiti. My parents have been missionaries to Haiti for 35 years, and so we have packed over 40-foot containers to ship to Haiti, and we have raised money and supported missions down in there, especially after the earthquake, and I have an adopted son from Haiti also.
Thank you. We've gotten time for our closing statements. Based on the earlier draw, Mr. Brede will go first and Ms. Maves will go second.
Well, thank you again for being here. The next 4 years will be critical as we begin to implement the Destination Medical Center initiative. And as was recently reported, Mayo Clinic's DMC plan has put the community on the cusp of the biggest economic development in Minnesota history. I have the experience in getting the DMC legislation passed and working with our state, county, and Mayo Clinic partners. Former Minneapolis Mayor R.T. Ryback said recently about me was Mayor Brede has led the city through complex times and now has Rochester poised for its greatest moments ever. Now, I appreciate those great words from some people that I have a great deal of respect for, but it's all about Rochester. I believe my experience in leadership will be beneficial for all citizens of Rochester. Low-income, affordable housing, youth, various ethnic and cultural groups and races. So in closing, I'm supportive of DMC, our diverse, marvelous citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Maves.
Again, thank you to those that hosted this event, and thank you all for coming out. It's so important that you're involved and that you want to be a part of the process. This is an important election. DMC is in its earliest stages with an estimated 20 years to complete. At some point, we're going to need a new mayor. And while we are in these early stages, it's the right time to establish new leadership that will be able to represent the city for the next 8 to 10 years with the critical development of DMC. We have enough people on the city council looking out for the downtown crowd. It's more important than ever that we have an honest, accountable, transparent leader that will look out for all the citizens of Rochester. And here's the truth. On November 5th, no matter what the outcome of this election is, I will still be holding the city accountable, and I will still be standing up for the citizens of Rochester. And on that, I will not fail. If you elect me to be your mayor, you will give me the tools that I need to be a strong voice for you. My name is Cindy Maves, and I ask for your vote on November 4th.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Before we begin the next segment, we'll take about a 5-minute break.